Both the first reading and the gospel have to do with the cleansing of lepers. And in both cases, the ones who are in the first reading, that person is not a Jew, he's a pagan, sent by his king who had apparently heard good news coming around about the prophet. And in the gospel, the only one that comes back to say thank you is the Samaritan. And as you remember from hearing in the past, the Samaritans and the Jews didn't get along. The Samaritans were part of the background, came from the same historic families, but they had some religious disputes, and so they didn't get along. And so it was like Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, the fighting that was there, and many other places. So they didn't get along. But it was this Samaritan who came back and said thank you. Now in that first reading, I always found it a little strange. He comes and he brings gifts to give to the prophet for the healing. And the prophet says, no, I can't take anything for healing you. And then he says, well, in that case, I'm going to take some dirt back with me. It's like, wait, you offer a gift, and then I say, no, I can't take that. And then you take something from us. Well, why did he ask for dirt? He got permission. He didn't just take it. Because his cure so changed him, and he had this new life, that he said, I can't believe in any other God. I've got to worship the God of Jerusalem, the God of the Jews. But I need something significant upon which to do my praying and my adoration. So I want 2 mule loads of dirt from here, from the Holy Land, to take that Holy Land back home with me. And so he did that. And but there was this gratitude that was there. In the gospel, these lepers come out, and now you have to remember the lepers were some who had leprosy, but anybody who had some kind of skin affliction, I knew I'd get it, some kind of skin affliction, they would be cast out. And that's because, remember, their medical concepts were not as good as ours today. They didn't have the kind of medicine we have. And so they didn't know how to cure these things. So almost anything that you had was an eruption on the skin. If you had a bad case of boils, or your acne was one of the really fierce attacks of acne, or you had psoriasis, or any kind of skin disease, they were thinking, well, you could be contagious. So you can't come into the community when we gather together and crowd in and pray. And the priests were the ones who were in control of who can come and who can't come to celebrate and pray. And so that's why Jesus says, okay, go show yourself to the priests. These people were considered lepers of some sort. Now, of course, the concept of leprosy goes beyond just skin diseases. In our world today, we're not looking at an awful lot of leprosy, although there is some reoccurrence of it, but we're really looking at the people that we consider to be the untouchables, the lepers, anyone that we look down on, anyone we cast aspersions to, anyone we say, why are they coming here? I didn't tell the other Mass this, but the church is imperfect. You know that, I know that, and it's a good thing, because if it were perfect, none of us would be allowed in. None of us would be allowed in if the church were perfect. So we have to be careful about who we cast aspersions on, and who we cast out, and who we consider untouchable, who we consider the lepers in society. Because Jesus does not send them away without healing. Jesus wants us all to be cured. So he says to them, go show yourself to the priests, and they do. We think a little bit about the miracle of cleansing on the way, and it must have been strange for them to suddenly on their way there to have these skin conditions or whatever it was cleansed up. And if they were limping because their limbs were so bad, they were healed. And so on this way to go show themselves to the priests, they were healed. And this one guy says, I have to go thank the Lord. And he comes back. Back in the 1800s, there was a young man, who went to Hawaii and was ordained there. He wanted to minister as a missionary. And he went there and he made his ministry the lepers. His name was Damien. And because they didn't understand what leprosy was all about either, the king said, you've all got to go over to this little place on Molokai, this peninsula. And anybody who was considered to be of leper, including the ones who really did have leprosy, were sent there. And from that area, there were natural land barriers, so there was no way they could get up the mountains and get into the mainland. They were stuck on this little area, this peninsula on Molokai. And that's where Damien went to serve. And he knew it was a death sentence to go there, because if he hung around with people that had not been treated, he eventually would come down with some form of leprosy. And he did. And he died there. He was the first Hawaiian saint, even though he wasn't of natural birth from Hawaii. And I think it was 2009, he was finally canonized as Saint Damien of Molokai. And at that particular time, the Belgians had arranged with Hawaii to bring his remains back to his native land. Kind of a neat little story there. But I always remember the story about him and giving himself over to the ministry of the people that would be considered the outcasts. It's like Mother Teresa. She'd pick up the people who were the outcasts, who were the untouchables, and touch them. How can you do that? Because I see Jesus in them. Because I see Jesus in them. So here's this particular person seeing that these lepers need someone to care for them, and that's what he did. He gave his life up. But that's how devastating this disease was. And so these people, of course, were cast out. They couldn't live in the city. They couldn't approach anybody. They all had bells they would ring. Untouchable, untouchable. Lepers were lepers. So you'd know to stay away from them. A lot of times they lived among the tombs in the cemeteries. And Jesus said, go, show yourself to the priest. And they were cured. And this man comes back, and it says he knelt down before Jesus and thanked him, the gratitude he had. And Jesus said, where are the other 9? Where is their gratitude? Didn't we heal 10? And he says to the young men, go, your faith has saved you. And he demonstrated that faith by coming back and thanking Jesus. Now, you know that there are things that your folks do for you or have done for you in the past, or your grandparents, and you kind of say, well, thank you very much. But sometimes there's great things that they do for you, and you don't understand it all, and sometimes you don't say thank you enough. There was one time when one of my siblings was having family problems, and I think it was back when I was still in the seminary or just newly ordained, and I got a letter from my parents. And in the letter, it was this nice letter that my dad had composed, and Mom and Dad both signed it, talking about the fact that we know that one of you is having a little difficulty, but we wanted to know that we appreciate you all. So there was a check for $1,000 in there. And each one of us got one of those. How do you say thank you for something like that? There are many other things that parents have done for us. A lot of times when we think they must be stupid, those parents of mine, what do they know? Then we go to college and we find out, oh, in the 3 years or 4 years I was at college, my parents really learned a lot. But how do you return that for them? And they say, you can't do that, but I tell you what you can do. You can be nice to your brothers and sisters. Ooh. Can we pick something else? Be nice to your brothers and sisters. Be nice to other people, just like we were nice to you, the way we were good to you. And that's what God says to us. When God answers our prayers in a way that we have looked for answers, we can't repay God for that. And I know a lot of times we ask for certain things, and we've been asking wrong. I've told you this before, that when my mother was near death, I kept praying for her to be cured, and it's not happening. And on the way home that one night, I said to myself, I'm praying wrong. My mother's body has fallen apart. She's not going to get well. Why am I praying for her to stay alive? Because I didn't want to lose her. So my prayer changed. If it's your will to heal her, make her well, please do that. But if not, take her home. And she died a few days later. But my prayer changed. because I was asking for the wrong thing. So sometimes God doesn't answer our prayers in the way we want it to happen. But He does answer our prayers. He hears that. And sometimes He says, no, that's not good for you. Why do I have to suffer from cancer or heart disease? He says, put up with that for now. Because with your suffering added to my suffering on the cross, we're saving the world. Offer that up. Be willing to suffer now, because your reward in heaven will be great. And so sometimes our prayers aren't answered the way they are, but no matter what, God hears our prayers, and He answers in maybe a way we aren't used to. And we need to be grateful for God. How can you do that? Can you go to God and say, thank you so much, it's wonderful. What can I do to repay you? Well, you can go say that, and Jesus or God will say, you can't repay me. There's no way you as a human being can repay God. But I tell you what you can do. You can love your brothers and sisters. You can do good to those around you. You can help those who are in need. You can get rid of your prejudices. You can take care of yourself. You can take care of one another. And in that way, you pay it forward. When you pay it forward, you take what God has given you and share that. And the love with which God has filled you can be shared with people whose lives you don't even know you're touching. It's one of the things, we were on retreat this last week, the priests, mostly senior priests, a couple of young guys. And one of the things that was brought up by a number of us was how we don't really know how what we've done in our priesthood has touched people's lives always. Very seldom hear that. Every once in a while something happens, and you hear about someone whose life was saved because you said or did something 40 years ago. We don't know how God's love works through us, but sometimes we touch people's lives and we have no idea. Pay it forward. Pay it forward. If the church were perfect, none of us would be here. And so it's good to know we're on this journey together. Be grateful to God. Be thankful. And bless and praise Him.